Okay, we're back. We're live. It's Wednesday. I'm Jay Fidell here on ThinkTech. I really enjoy doing this. We're doing Life in the Law today with our guest, Sherry Broder, who I call a super lawyer and host of Living Legend Lawyers Both. It's only appropriate. Hi, Sherry.
Hi, Jay.
We want to know more about you. We're calling this Making the Law Work.
To achieve social justice.
Oh, let me write that down. Yeah, to achieve social justice. You heard it here on ThinkTech.
Okay.
Why do you say to achieve? What is that?
Well, I did a case on behalf of all the people in the Philippines who were tortured and murdered during martial law. So when Ferdinand Marcos came to Hawaii, and we filed a lawsuit against him as a class action on behalf of all of those people. And we did get a very large verdict, and we spent the next 25 years working on collecting.
It was a very large verdict.
It was. It was $2 billion.
Collected?
We've collected about 26 million.
Oh, that's something.
Yeah, so
that's a
it's
major
pretty good.
case. Wow.
And we've had 2 distributions in the Philippines to the victims. So
That's great. That's great. Wow, that's what I can imagine how much work and thought and sort of global thinking has to go into a case like that. And that was part of the Hawaii history also, because he was so connected here, had a house here. I've seen the house. Yeah.
Well, that was one of the things that we went to collect after we got our verdict, is we did file against the house that he lived in Makiki Heights.
What a case.
Tried to take that house, and it was in the name of one of his cronies, the Tantocos. So we pursued that, and eventually, actually, they did pay us money. So that was part of the many millions of dollars that we collected.
The thing is that you have to have a certain attitude. Take a case like that. Be willing to invest your time, the risk of it, and sort of unknown difficulties taking a case like that.
Yeah, but I felt very strongly, because he was overthrown in the EDSA revolution. In the Philippines, they said at that time there were 3 Gs: guns, goons, and gold. And people alleged that he had stolen the election in 1986 when he declared himself the winner. And the people, just like we would do as Americans, they had democracy in the Philippines at one point in time, and he took it away from them. So
see, that's like the Ben Franklin story.
Yeah.
What kind of a government are you going to have, Dr. Franklin? We're going to have a republic, madam, if you can hold it, if you can keep it.
Yeah.
And so you can lose democracy just as fast.
Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
Oh, that's okay. So when he came here, I said to my husband, John Van Dyke, I said, well, how come he gets to come here? Why isn't he in Paraguay with Mengele, or in Argentina or Brazil with all those ex-Nazis who are living there? How come he gets to come to beautiful Hawaii, live on the beach in Niu? I said, no, that's not right.
Yeah, that was bad.
Yeah.
What kind of atrocities was he charged with?
Well, he was charged with torturing and summarily executing people, and then also causing disappearance. So we worked with the task force detainees, who was a group of Catholic nuns and priests who went around the Philippines between 1972 and 1986 during martial law and documented all the atrocities. And when we eventually had the class action and we had people file their claims, the numbers turned out to be very similar to what the task force detainees had actually collected.
When you have atrocities like this, you can't catch them all, though. If you know he disappeared people, how many people disappeared, and we don't have information.
Yeah.
It sounds like Nuremberg, actually. It must have been inspired, at least in part, by that. Yeah.
It was inspired in part by that. And the law says that you can sue, one person who's not a U.S. citizen or resident can sue another person who's not a U.S. citizen or resident.
In U.S. courts.
In U.S. courts, but only in cases where everybody agrees that it's against the law, that it's against customary international law. So after World War II, the nations of the world, entered into a lot of treaties about torture. And so now today that's considered to be customary international law, that a government can't torture its citizens, that that's a crime.
But you confirmed it there. I mean, what I mean is you were able to proceed
Yeah.
under that approach, and they couldn't stop you, and you did in fact achieve a judgment under that approach, which means that if somebody else did what Marcos did, the same result could be attained. I mean, you could sue him in U.S. courts for violation of treaty law that's agreed by other parties. Same kind of thing could happen again. Has it happened, Sherry?
Well, there have been other lawsuits since ours, and actually, during the pendency of our lawsuit, Congress passed a law called the Torture Victim Protection Act, which does allow for these kind of cases to be in U.S. District Court.
Wow, what a case.
Yeah.
There's a huge psychic benefit and a historic benefit, if you will. Yeah. Oh, I'm more impressed now than I was when we started. Sorry. Well, let's talk about Maine.
Okay. Yes.
Nice state.
It is. It's a beautiful place. But right now, of course, Jay,
Yeah.
it's been snowing for weeks on end, and they've had twice as much snow as they have in any usual winter. So it's.
You don't need to go back there right now.
I'm not going to visit now,
How
but
was-
I do go back there pretty often.
Family.
Now I don't have any family left there, but I still have a lot of friends, and I'm a trustee of a foundation in Maine, so I go back for the board meetings.
Well, that's great. So what do you think of Maine? What do you think of that part of the country? I have family that has one of those houses, from 1830
Uh-huh.
somewhere in Massachusetts there, and they love it. I mean,
Yeah.
the New England thing has come around for our generation, don't you think? It's got a great appeal to it.
I think it's a wonderful place. My sister lives in the Boston area, and so I was very worried about her when all the snow started happening, because people were losing their electricity, and you have to shovel the snow off your roof because your roof can collapse and everything. So I was kind of worried about her, and I called her, and she said, I said, "How is it?" And she said, "Oh, it's gorgeous, everything's all white and clean, and it's just terrific, and I love to go outside and shovel. I'm getting all this exercise and everything." But then when I called her the next week, after it had been snowing for a whole week since then, I said, "How is it?" She said, "I hate it." So she was over it. And then she sent me a cartoon, and the cartoon is Moses in front of somebody's door, and instead of parting the waves, they're parting the snow.
That's perfect.
So it's really funny.
We'll see more of that with climate change, I'm sorry to say.
Yeah.
So why did you leave Maine exactly?
Well, when I was in college,
Wellesley.
I went to Wellesley in Massachusetts, near Boston. And between my freshman and sophomore year in college, I went to California to house sit for my Calabash uncle, who ran an amusement park in Maine. And so he went back to Maine for the summer. He moved to California to become a banker. And so he wanted me to come and house sit because he had a very fine art collection, beautiful art collection. So I said, okay. So I went out there and I house sat that summer, and then of course,
changed your life.
I wanted to move to the Bay Area right away,
Yeah.
and I wanted to go to Berkeley.
Yeah.
But my mother said she would pay for Wellesley, but she wouldn't pay for Berkeley. So I finished up at Wellesley, and 3 days later, my Calabash uncle asked me to come. He'd already asked me to come out there. So 3 days later, I got on the plane and moved to California, and I house sat for him again that summer, and then he helped me get a job. And I worked for 2 years. Then I went to law school in California, and I was able to go as a California resident.
What in that package made you a person concerned about social justice?
I was always like that. That doesn't have to do so much with the package. I think that has to do with the way I was brought up and the values of the community that I was in. So actually my Calabash uncle was from Biddeford, Maine, which is where my mother's from, and my father was from Bangor, which is where I grew up, and they were Jewish, and they really believed in that part of the Jewish philosophy, which really believes in giving back and being generous. And so when my uncle passed away, it's his foundation's board that I sit on, he left most of his money to a foundation. And my Calabash uncle, who went into banking in California, became quite wealthy. He's left all his money to charity. And so I think that's the kind of, family, community upbringing that I had, and that those were the high, that's the highest value for them.
Did you have a kitchen table where people discussed, heady issues and current events and and ethical and moral issues and social justice issues?
Well, my boyfriend in high school, his mother was like that, and she always had coffee on at her house, and she had a big kitchen table, and I used to love to go over there. She went to Wellesley, which is why I wanted to go to Wellesley. I wanted to be just like his mother. I mean, that sounds a little weird.
Role model.
But I just adored her, and so we would always do that. We would go over there and sit around. My parents worked too hard to sit around the kitchen table and talk.
What was your father's occupation?
He was a retail merchant, and he had stores in Bangor and in northern Maine. So in the potato season, when people would, pick all day, then at night they would go to the store and buy stuff. And so in the potato season, he and I used to drive up there, like to Madawaska, Maine, or in Limestone, Maine. He had the only clothing store. So we would drive up there during the potato season on the weekends, and we would work, till 2 a.m., selling clothes and stuff like that.
You still have a little Maine in your voice.
A little. If we were
Hold
back
on to
there,
that.
if we were back there, you probably wouldn't even be able to understand me. Because then, and people always say when I get back there that they can't. If I call them on the phone here, that's hard to understand me.
Okay, so here we are in California. We have a law degree. We have a couple of years of practice in California, and something happens that makes us want to come to Hawaii. What is that thing?
Okay, well, first I'm going to back up and tell you a little bit about my law practice in California, because you're going to love it.
Okay,
you're going to love it.
All right.
So when my law practice in California, I worked for Charles Gary, and he represented the Black Panthers. So my very first case, I represented Elaine Brown, who was at that point in time head of the Black Panther Party, because Huey Newton was in prison. And she was charged.
It's national.
Yeah,
Already?
she was charged with smuggling cocaine into San Quentin prison for Johnny Spain. So Johnny Spain was involved in the George Jackson shootout at Soledad prison. And so,
A nice, quiet girl from Maine. Oh my God. Okay, keep going.
Okay, but this was my first case, my first time in court. And, I asked Charles Gary, well, what do I do and everything? And he says, just go for it, do it. So I get there and I go, okay, did they test the cocaine? It's probably mostly talcum powder, and everything. And the judge goes, well, did you test it? And they go, well, no. And he goes, okay, I'm going to agree with Miss Broder, it's mostly talcum powder. And so they gave her a deferred acceptance of guilty plea, only in Marin County, where she had to go 6 weeks to yoga class. So,
this is really out of the 60s, isn't it?
Yeah. So then they did a lot of work for labor unions, and I did that kind of work for them, and worked on some other famous cases, criminal cases in California at the time.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a time that was.
Yeah.
I can take myself back there. I can visualize. Okay, we're going to take a break, though.
Okay.
Okay, and when we come back, we will
Okay, we'll go back to why did I move to Hawaii?
Yeah, that's what we're going to do.
All
Okay,
right.
that's Sherry Broder.
All right, is that okay, Carol?
Yeah.
Hi, my name is Andrew Howard. I'm an astronomer at the Institute for Astronomy at the University of Hawaii up in Manoa. I'd like to tell you about the annual open house that we're having this year. It is on April 6th, 11 to 4 p.m. It's an all-ages event, kids, grown-ups, even people in between. Everyone is welcome. We have a lot of really fun activities. You get to meet astronomers, look at yourself in an infrared camera, play with Legos, make robots, look at videos. You can even make some of the kids like to make comets out of gravel and snow. Even adults like to do that too. You'll be able to look at the sun with a solar camera safely. It's really a great activity. We do this every year in April, and I hope to see you this year. Thanks.
No, we got to move on.
Okay, we're back, we're live. We're here with Sherry Broder, a super lawyer and host of the Living Legend Lawyers. Here on Life in the Law, our law program on Wednesdays. We're talking about making the law work to achieve social justice, which is the bottom line common denominator. Okay, as we left this story, you had made a decision for some reason or another to come to Hawaii. Talk to us.
Okay, so I graduated from Berkeley Law School, and my husband, who was already a law professor at the time, and I came to Hawaii for a 2-week vacation to celebrate, but we fell in love with Hawaii, and we decided to stay for 6 weeks, and we took the money that I was going to spend on the bar review course to rent a house in Lahaina. So
You didn't need to study anyway.
we rented this house, this old plantation house right in Lahaina. Now it's a shopping center, you know. But we had big mango trees and everything, and we just fell in love with Hawaii. So we thought on the way back, my husband took a cab into town and had an interview.
This is John Van Dyke.
Yeah. So we thought we would come for a visiting year. So that's how it all got started. He did get offered a visiting professorship, and we came for a visiting year.
That was at the outset of the
Right.
John A. Burns School of Law.
It's the William S.
William S. Richardson School of
Yeah.
Law. Sorry,
Yeah,
medicine law.
we came, the first year was 1976, which was, so he taught every class except the very first class until he passed away,
Yeah, so he was there. Well, he passed away in, what, 2011?
2011.
Yeah. That was a loss to the law school, among other things.
Yeah.
But you and he kind of practiced together over those years.
We did a lot of work together. We did the Marcos human rights case together. We did the heptachlor litigation together.
Talk about that. Can we talk about the heptachlor litigation?
Yeah,
That was notable at the time.
We, in 1982, the state made an announcement that there was heptachlor in the milk in Hawaii, and we were supposed to throw all of our milk away because the heptachlor was in excess of federal EPA levels. And so, of course, I had been pregnant during that time and given birth and was breastfeeding, and the heptachlor bioaccumulated in the milk and everything. So, I thought, well, nobody's going to poison my baby and get away with it.
Social justice.
So I organized a group of pregnant and or breastfeeding mothers to file a lawsuit, which we did, and we sued everybody for a breach of contract. So it wasn't a personal injury lawsuit because we couldn't prove any damages. We didn't want to be drinking milk with a pesticide that causes central nervous system damage to ants.
Yeah.
We didn't want to be drinking something like that, but to actually prove a personal injury was difficult. So it was a breach of contract case, and we were seeking a refund for all the milk that we bought and milk products
Open and shut.
that were no
Bad milk.
good, right? Bad milk. And well, then also in Hawaii at the time, the law allowed you to collect damages for emotional distress for breach of contract. So for all the breastfeeding and pregnant mothers, we sued for emotional distress too. Well, after that case, the legislature changed the law. You can't get emotional distress anymore for these breach of contract.
I remember that change.
Yeah. So anyways, so that was what the case was about, and we eventually settled the case for $4 million, and we set up a nonprofit foundation, the Hawaii Heptachlor Research and Education Foundation, and we did 2 major epidemiological studies of the children of Hawaii who were born during that time to see if there were any adverse health effects. So it was very, very difficult to do this study because we actually don't have a big enough population for a really solid epidemiological study. But what we did do is we set up a scientific advisory committee. We got Irving Selikoff, who was at Mount Sinai Hospital in New York and made the connection between asbestos and mesothelioma, way back when. And as we got him to be chair of the scientific advisory committee, and we had like 11 other, top-notch scientists. So any research that we did do, any epidemiological studies that we did, we had them peer review them.
What a great contribution. Does it still exist?
It does still exist. So we did a number of in-laboratory studies, and we also did the 2 big epidemiological studies. The second study was of great interest to EPA. So they actually gave several additional $1 million to our researchers who had done the 2 studies to do further work on it. So the studies were actually inconclusive. But what we decided to do is we still have some money left. We're waiting to see. We're just kind of waiting to see what might be the next thing to do because, well, for cancer, they say it's a 30-year incubation period or something like that. So we still are looking at a number of different things. We also did an education project where we did a video about what happened, how the state covered up. Because actually
you found a cover-up, an affirmative cover-up.
They found heptachlor in the milk like in October, and they didn't make an announcement till January because they were double-checking the results or whatever.
People might have been
right. We were all still drinking it, of course, and everything. So we kind of did a video on, when you're responsible for things like this, what can go wrong and what might be best standards practice.
So you're again, as in the Marcos thing, you're creating a model for somebody else to use in a similar situation later.
Well, actually, the Marcos case has been cited by the U.S. Supreme Court as an example of if you want to do one of these human rights cases.
This is how you do it.
This
Oh,
is
that's
a good
great.
one.
That's a compliment
Justice
to you.
Breyer likes our case. And the heptachlor case has been included in law review articles. And
I have to tell you my
books and
connection with
stuff.
heptachlor.
Okay. Don't tell me you represented the green chop.
We represented Foremost Dairies.
Did you?
On matters unrelated to heptachlor.
Okay.
And one time I was going to have a meeting with my client, and they wanted me to come out near the prison it was on Dillingham. So I drove out there early one morning, and as I arrived, the secretary to my client asked me if I wanted to have a beverage. And I said, yes, I did. And she said, do you want to have coffee or tea? I said, I'll have the coffee. She said, would you like to have sugar in your coffee? I said, yes, I do. She said, would you like to have, milk or cream in your coffee? I said, I'll have milk. She said, would you like the milk with or without heptachlor? It was a joke, of course. I'll never forget, though.
Yeah,
this was pretty
cute.
interesting at the time.
That's cute.
Anyway, okay, let's talk about, international ocean law.
Okay.
Now, John Van Dyke got involved in this. He traveled all over the world to speak about it. He had connections everywhere about international ocean law, which is also, by implication, environmental law in all the oceans of the world. How did he start in that way back when, or did he get involved in it when he got here?
Well, I think what you would say is he was involved in public international ocean law, because like private international ocean law would be more like admiralty type of cases and stuff. But he was involved in that from the very beginning, because when he graduated from Harvard Law School, first he taught law school for 2 years, and then he went to the Center for Democratic Institutions, which was run by Robert Hutchins, who had been president of the University of Chicago. And he had funding. It was like a liberal think tank. And Elizabeth Mann Borghese, the daughter of Thomas Mann, was at the Center for the Study of Democratic Institutions, and she was very into saving the oceans. And she was involved in organizing a conference with Ambassador Prado in Mauritius in like 1967 or 1968, something like that. And it was called Pacem in Maribus, which means peace in the oceans.
Wonderful.
And so he went to that, and that was the beginning. That was even before the Law of the Sea negotiations started, but that was the beginning of all of that. So he was involved from the very beginning.
So he was really there for the whole discussion. I mean,
He was.
There was no discussion before he was involved.
Well, no, there was discussion. I mean, there's a treaty, a 1958 treaty, so that does predate John.
All right.
But-
And you got involved too, at least with him.
Yes.
And then when he died in 2011, you continued in the international ocean law, no?
Yes, so I've been trying to continue in that field and continue his work. So I was just appointed an arbitrator in international arbitration for involving a 850-ton fishing vessel from Taiwan flying the flag of Kiribati with a crew from India and the Philippines and other places that went aground in a remote atoll in Yap. And so I just got appointed. The other arbitrator is Sir David Steele from London. So it's been kind of fun.
That's pretty interesting.
It's been fun. I learned quite a bit, actually. I didn't know that when these ships go aground, the first thing that they do, an 850-ton ship, that's a big ship. The first thing they do is they go out there with another ship and they pump all the petroleum out of the ship that went aground. So as bad as it is stuck on the coral reef, and creating, degradation of an otherwise pristine marine environment. It still could be even worse, right? If the petroleum and other toxic
So they have
substances.
to take remedial steps right away.
They do that right away. And the interesting thing is the reason it went aground is they were using old navigational maps. And I guess in that part of the Pacific, what happens is the coral reefs grow very quickly. And so the coral reef was much higher than the maps
And the
were
maps
showing.
showed another depth.
Yep.
Interesting. That happens. But, didn't you say a little while ago that this did not involve admiralty? Sure sounds to me like it involves admiralty, eh?
Well, I guess so. Yeah, right. It does.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
Well, you were in the Coast Guard,
Yeah,
right?
I know,
So
I
you
know.
know all about it.
I could tell you stories, but we don't have time for that.
No. Well, what do you think about that? Using a map that's too old, a navigational map that's too
No
old.
question, you have to renew them. They change. Everyone knows.
They do.
So these
yeah.
guys maybe are saving $2 on the map, meanwhile they're putting the ship at risk and all the environment at risk too.
I mean, you would think in today's day and age that you could get the maps off the computer.
Exactly.
I mean, there
And
should
you
be
would
no
have
reason
internet
to have
real
a.
time,
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's interesting. So as an arbitrator, you decide what, liability?
Well, we decide the issues in the case. The first issue, of course, I mean, each side is represented by lawyers. So the first issue, of course, is jurisdiction. Do we even have jurisdiction to decide? Because there's also a lawsuit going on in the National Courts of the Federated States of Micronesia. So we haven't even decided if we have jurisdiction yet. And the other arbitrator, it's very interesting because the British tradition is quite different in terms of litigation than the American tradition. So it's
What
been
an
very
interesting
interesting.
case. Yeah, you've been naming these cases and these subjects are really interesting. And before we go to the break, I just want to make a statement. My statement is this is exactly what Hawaii needs to do to be a legal bridge to other places. We need to have arbitrators come from Hawaii. We need to have proceedings that are, rooted in Hawaii and decided in Hawaii. So you're doing a favor for Hawaii too. This is important. Yeah, good. This kind of expertise is global. Anyway, that's Sherry Broder. I call her a super lawyer and host of Living Legend Lawyers here on ThinkTech. We're talking about life and the law today. We're talking about making the law work to advance social justice. And in a funny way, admiralty can be social justice. We'll be right back.
Hi, I'm your host on ThinkTech Asia, Bill Sharp. I look forward to you joining us each Monday between 4 and 5 o'clock when we film right here in our studio in downtown Honolulu. The show, ThinkTech Asia, focuses on contemporary events in Asia. And by Asia, we mean anything from Hawaii, south to Australia and New Zealand, west to Pakistan, and as far north as the Russian Far East. Clearly, this is one of the most economically dynamic centers of the world. and we bring you up to date on what's going on in a whole host of countries in this very vital region. We look forward to seeing you. Aloha.
Okay, there's something I forgot to mention. I'm derelict in my duty. Sherry is the incoming president of the Federal Bar Association, which is really terrific. I was a member of the Federal Bar Association for federal lawyers on federal issues, which is perfect for you.
Well, we hope you'll join again. We have some
After
very
this is-
interesting meetings. We just had one, oh my gosh, it was yesterday. We had one yesterday, and we had the 3 Ninth Circuit judges who are here for a panel right now. So they spoke, and learned a lot.
That's great. And
Yeah.
you were the Bar Association president here in Hawaii, the first woman Bar
Yeah,
Association
I was.
president.
I was.
And
It's
as I
already a
mentioned-
little while ago, but
And okay, and as I mentioned before the show, that means you were the first woman Bar Association president from the state of Maine, which is saying something. Anyway,
Yeah.
so you mentioned that somebody was here recently, a woman, to talk about international arbitration as a phenomenon here in Hawaii. Who was that?
that was Lucy Reed. So Lucy Reed was here very recently, and she talked about Hawaii as a niche place for international arbitration. I guess there's some lessening interest in having arbitrations in Hong Kong. You know, the more Beijing tries to put its imprimatur on the legal system and other aspects of the Hong Kong society, the declining interest in conducting the international arbitrations there. So she was talking about, you know, how Hawaii could possibly provide a niche for that. She, as a former president of the Society of International Law, that's huge. You know, other people who have been president of the American Society of International Law have gone on to become the dean at the London College of Law, which is one of the 10 greatest law schools in the world, or gone on to become judges on the International Court of Justice. So that's a really big position. She has gone on to be one of the most famous international arbitrators, and she travels the world and does
That's great.
arbitrations.
And for her to make those statements, you know, as I mentioned, I think this could be a great thing for Hawaii going forward. Not only international ocean law arbitration, but international arbitration in general, business arbitration right here. There's so many good reasons to do that.
Yeah.
It would help the law school for sure. It would help the community. It would give us another possibility for tourism. You know, business tourism, law tourism, it's all the same. And it's a safe place for people to decide disputes. you
Yes.
know. Anyway, I wanted to turn your attention for a minute to our case together involving Citizens for Fair Valuation, which you and John Van Dyke represented for a few years, regarding then called HRPT, now called Commonwealth Properties, which is a REIT out of Boston. But can you summarize what happened and give me the takeaway on that case?
Well, that case came about because the Boston REIT bought both the Damon Estate commercial properties and the Campbell Estate commercial properties when those estates were winding down. And basically what that ended up meaning is that one entity owned almost all the commercial property in Hawaii. And we were working with the tenants, and they had already been complaining that that the rents were too high. And this created a situation where, there just aren't any alternatives for these poor tenants. And, so the dispute was over how to have fair valuation in the determination of the rents, how it can be done. So, if there's a dispute over the rent, the contracts require the parties to go to arbitration. But the problem is that the REIT owns all these commercial properties. So case number one is unbelievably important to them, and the REIT can spend whatever, whereas the poor tenant can't. And so it's a very unequal bargaining situation, and we were trying to equalize the bargaining situation a little bit, a little bit. And the legislature passed a law to bring some fairness to the process, but the REIT went to federal court and challenged it. So that was kind of what the case was about. John, my husband, always thought that we were right and they were wrong. But unfortunately, the federal judge didn't agree, and so the case was taken up on appeal. The state of Hawaii was represented by the Attorney General's office, who disagreed with us and was supposedly defending the state statute, but I think it really undermined the case tremendously because the Attorney General had testified at the legislatures against the legality of the statute. So when then he would go to court and try to argue that it was, doing his job as he was supposed to do, which was to defend the statute, but he was kind of always undercutting his own argument by his prior testimony. So it was a very difficult situation.
Yeah, but it's sort of like those other cases that you were involved in. You identified a problem, as you just discussed, about valuation in the state of Hawaii, in an island state with not enough land. And then a foreign investment organization comes in and buys huge tracts of land and is able to control all the comparables in that area and develop strategies that cover lots of landowners, rather tenants, long-term tenants, who don't necessarily know what the strategy is. And so they're in little silos, and this large investor, he can develop strategies to cover them all. And it was really an unfair bargaining position. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it had really been brought to public attention before. So even if the federal court, agreed with the REIT in this case, I think the question was raised. And it's something that we're going to have to consider. All of us are going to have to consider going forward if we want to allow these mom and pop businesses to stay in business. It ultimately goes to a question of what kind of economy we're going to have. Will it be owned and controlled by REITs out of Boston, or will it be mom and pops? What do we really prefer on that? And I don't think the field has been quite equalized yet. But I think because you raised that issue, because the litigation took place in the public forum, there'll be somebody else later, Sherry. Maybe you.
Well, I want to make a couple of corrections.
Please.
Okay, one is you were the one that discovered this problem, and you were already working on it long before John and I came along, and you were quite concerned about it. And I see your same interest in the effect of monopolization of an important asset in our community, and I see the kind of work that you're doing now relating to the next era purchase of Hawaiian Electric, and your concern about how this is going to affect the community. So I see you as having the same kind of interest. But I just wanted to correct and say that you were the one that found this issue, not me. And then the second thing is I just wanted to clarify that what happened in the case was we did lose before the district judge, and then an appeal was taken. But the Office of the Attorney General settled with the REIT, settled with the REIT. And so we never had the opportunity to see the full constitutional argument be made before another panel.
Because the tenants in the location, the Citizens for Fair Valuation, were cut out of that settlement. They had no power in the settlement, which is just another piece of unfairness that happened here. But taking it forward, it seems to me that Hawaii has, talk about social justice, or maybe expanding it to social-economic justice, maybe it's close. We need to have cases like that. We need to stand up and preserve ourselves in a fast-moving world in which capital will flow into the state and destroy our values and twist our society to a thing we don't want. Very hard to do that, but and very hard to do it legally.
Yeah.
But I think that there's a place for that.
Yeah.
And there is a place for lawyers coming up, through the law school and through the community to actually do the kinds of things that you have been doing in your career. What's your advice to them?
Well, I think the law school here has a lot of good programs for people who are interested in public interest law, interested in social justice issues. You can go to the UH Law School, the William S. Richardson School of Law. You can get a certificate in environmental law. You can get a certificate in Native Hawaiian law. So that's pretty good. And you know, there are opportunities to do those things. In terms of advice to young people who are starting out in the legal profession, I think it's always important, whether you're a lawyer or whatever you do, that you stay true to your own beliefs and values, and that you're not afraid to pursue your vision of, you know, what will make the community a better place.
It's part of being a lawyer, isn't it? You do have a duty to the community. I mean, some lawyers don't see it that way, but I think they should. That every lawyer is an officer not only of the court, but an officer of the community itself. And you have to take cases like that. You have to do pro bono work. You have to have conversations like this. So the other thing is, you mentioned, you know, Native Hawaiian rights and interests. I know you and John Van Dyke, you know, spent years, actually from the outset, from the Constitutional Convention of 1978 on forward,
Yeah.
Working with OHA and making OHA into, you know, a working, well-funded establishment. Can you talk about that?
Well, it's really been my great privilege to have the opportunity to work with Native Hawaiian people on their claims and entitlements, and to try to bring some semblance of justice to some of the wrongs that were done to them. So I was very fortunate to be assigned as the attorney for the Committee on Hawaiian Affairs at the 1978 Constitutional Convention, and I had a chance to work with Governor Wahe'e and Frenchie DeSoto.
It's going back.
Yeah, that's going back. So also at that CONCON was Kali Watson, who later became head of the Department of Hawaiian Homelands and still does development on the Hawaiian homelands. And Mililani Trask was there as well.
She's been at this table.
Yeah. So so it was a great opportunity, and you know, we were able to create the Office of Hawaiian Affairs at the 78 Constitutional Convention. So John Wahe'e always jokes and says, you know, I asked you, Sherry, you know, was it you know, what do you think about this? And I would, you know, you always said, let's just do it. So yeah, so it's been great to see OHA develop and grow and be able to do so much for the Hawaiian community. You know, they do a lot of scholarships. They try to help the homeless. They do a lot of work to preserve sacred sites and special areas. They, you know, purchased Waimea Valley, so now it's, you know, they grow indigenous plants there. They try to have Native Hawaiian cultural practices there. They help the Kaho'olawe Commission. So I see OHA doing so many fantastic, wonderful things for the Hawaiian community.
That was a really important product of the Constitutional Convention of 1978. Do you think, you know, we've missed one or two since then? I mean, what is it, a 10-year cycle?
Yeah.
Do you think we should have another one? Constitutional Convention?
Well, I think that what we would need to do is identify some issues that we think need to be changed in the Hawaii State Constitution that can't be done via a constitutional amendment put on the ballot. You know, the Constitution was changed to force judges to retire at age 70, so that was on the ballot, and we've had other provisions on the ballot. So I think, you know, to have a whole constitutional convention with the expense involved, to be looking at the whole Constitution, you know, how much change do we need? Yeah. My husband disagreed with me on that. He thought we should have another constitutional convention. He thought it was really
great. He had
great.
a good time back in '78.
He thought it was great. Well, he was a constitutional law scholar, and he always thought the '78 CONCON was just fantastic and done so many wonderful things. One of the other things I think that CONCON did that's really important is the public trust doctrine. So there were some provisions that were changed in the Hawaii Constitution, which made the public trust doctrine much stronger in Hawaii. And now, as we see, going back to what you were saying before, foreign capital or non-Hawaii capital coming into Hawaii, buying everything up, changing the community and how things are. I think we're going to see a lot more use by the courts of the public trust doctrine.
A PS to that, in April, ThinkTech is doing a luncheon panel program on the question of how can we better manage the investment of foreign capital, offshore capital in Hawaii, with the notion of we can do better if we just manage it within legal parameters. And I mean, you know, Super Ferry, I mean, Comcast, I mean, NextEra. How do we manage this flow of capital coming in so that we stay, you know, we stay ourselves? But one more thing, you know, you've had a fantastic career. We've covered some of the big points of it. You're sort of a child of the 60s, a lawyer of the 70s, all the way through. You've had a huge effect on the practice here and on the practice of women here too. What's your plan? You're going to continue teaching now and practicing? I looked at your website. You're actively practicing. You're all over it. So what's your plan?
Well, my plan is, I feel like, you know, I know what I'm doing, and I enjoy it. And so I want to keep practicing and helping people. I do some things now I don't charge for. I do other things I do charge for, but I only take cases that I want to take, and I want to continue to give back to my community and be involved in the community. And ultimately, of course, I want to be able to take care of my family and my friends.
The funny thing about social justice is that inherent in the term social justice is common good and doing things for your community. It all comes together. That's Sherry Broder, super lawyer and host of our Living Legend Lawyers series here on Life in the Law on Wednesday, making the law work for social justice and all the things inherent in that. Thank you so much, Sherry.
Thank you, Jay.